Welcome back to this new episode of Creative Industry Radio. My guest today is Billy Arora. Billy is an international fashion model and has been featured in publications like Vogue, Grazia and Officiel, and as well as for luxury brands like MS and Yves Saint Laurent. She's represented by top agencies like Elite, Ford and IMG. And beyond her modeling career, Billy has been well noticed for her education in holistic nutrition and in herbalism, and she started her own fashion brand, Sentiments, where she incorporated literature and fashion. We recently got to work together for a Vogue Magazine Cover Story, and now we sat down to unfold her remarkable career to the creative family and share some inspiration. In this conversation, we took a deep dive into how Billy started out in the creative industry and how a Sephora campaign kicked off her international career in New York. We speak about Billy's mom, also a successful model herself, and how she became Billy's mentor. Billy was also open to talk about how it can be very hard to deal with expectations, feelings, self-esteem and confidence in the industry, and that models can be under insane judgments by model agencies. As we were talking about mental health, Billy openly talked about burnout and how surrendering to the circumstances and accepting and being honest with people got Billy out of this loop. Finally, we have an honest conversation about social media, its benefits and risks. We talk about absurd face filters and how too little media competence can bring unwanted noise into your life. During the pod, Billy drops inspiring book suggestions and in the end asks you, the creative family, a question that we would love for you to answer in the comments of the Instagram post to this episode with Billy. And if you, after listening to this episode, find that you got some value out of this conversation, please consider leaving a review or subscription to this podcast and also forward this episode to someone that you think can benefit from the value of this episode. Are you ready to discover what it is like to be an international fashion model? Perfect. Here's Billy. Enjoy. So welcome to the show, Billy. It's super nice to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here.
And I got a first question for you. That is, what's the smell of your childhood? What comes to your mind first?
Horses.
Horses. Okay. Can you unwind that a little bit?
Yeah. So my mom we kind of lived the same life. So my mom actually rode horses while I was growing up, and I always wanted to follow in her footsteps. So my whole childhood, I was like kind of pestering my parents to let me get a pony and like go ride and hang out at farms and stuff. And eventually they came in. So I would say probably for the good half of my childhood, I spent most of the days at the barn.
Wow.
Riding and just being around the horses.
Well, that must have been wonderful as a kid to have all that surroundings, nature, and these amazing animals.
It was, in hindsight, I feel like it did a lot for me because it almost disciplined me in a way at a young age. Because I even would go to horse shows and stuff, and I would have to wake up like 5 a.m. and make sure my horses were all ready and everything. It was definitely a very special part of my childhood.
Wow, that's really exciting. So for how long have you been in that surrounding?
So I don't ride anymore. I rode for about 12 years, up into a professional level where it was basically my life. I traveled pretty much every 2 weeks to a different destination. I rode in Europe, the States, and obviously back in Canada. And I stopped riding when I'm going to say when I was about 19.
Okay. And maybe we should, for the people that don't know you, maybe we can give a little background on where you're from, because you just mentioned Sweden and Canada, so that's a mix. And maybe you can give a little background and of what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I was born in Canada. I was born in a place called Victoria, BC. It's an island off of Vancouver on the west coast. My dad's actually from India. He immigrated to Canada when he was 16, and my mom is from Norway. But Sweden, yes, my mom lives in Sweden currently. My father is still here in Canada, and I am here in Canada right now. I actually just got back from Sweden. I was in Europe for the last month.
Yes, and that's when we connected and agreed on that visit of yours in the show. So, many people are really fascinated by the mysterious and kind of shiny world of fashion and luxury, and the stories behind the facades of those big brands. And so you're really into this. And would you mind unpacking this a little bit for the listeners? And could you take us behind the scenes? What does your day-to-day look like when you have a production and after that?
So basically, so when I would have a job, I mean, it would depends if I'm traveling for work or if it's a local job. But basically, so it depends what time call time is. So it's usually about like, I would say anywhere from like 7 to 8 a.m. And I usually show up to set. And then hair and makeup starts, and we kind of go over like the mood board for the day and like kind of what the client or the photographer is looking for.
Yes.
And then we basically, most days it's about an 8-9 hour day. So we shoot all day. We get like a lunch break. And then I always take time when I can to kind of like go for a walk outside on my lunch break or something like that. And then usually when we wrap up, we'll probably go over. My favorite thing at the end of the day is I love when we shoot tethered so I can see the images,
Yes.
because I feel like that's really special. And I also feel like it's motivating in a sense, because if you're shooting and then you're like, oh, you know what, like that looks really good, you kind of just, it kind of gives you the energy you need for the day to keep going, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, because you know what you created with the team, and you have got a feel of achievement. And yeah, that's, you know, that's something in the creative industry that is, I guess, very important to everyone that is somewhat connected to creative projects. If you build something with your hand, you know what you did in the end of the day. But if you're creating images, or I don't know, just create a slogan or a campaign or whatever, and you need to have that feeling of accomplishment and the end of the day, right? And
for sure, yeah. And then, I mean, and then there's obviously times where you shoot on location, right? So you're not always in a studio, whether
yes.
it be outside, which happens quite often. I've actually shot outside in Germany quite a lot, which was actually some of my best memories for work, I would say.
Oh, really?
I shot a video for Officiel outside Munich, actually, at a corn maze.
Oh.
And that was really cool because, like, it's work days like that which in hindsight I'm like, you know what, that was so special, because I remember obviously like I got picked up, and you go to a corn maze in the middle of nowhere, and it's so beautiful everywhere, and you shoot, but then all of a sudden it's 3 o'clock and all the kids are off school. So like as we're working, all the families come with their children, and they're like running around the corn maze all day, and it's cool, you know what, like that kind of stuff is like special to me to experience, and just not sitting in a studio all day.
Yes, of course. And that's where life happens outside, right? And
yeah.
So what, now that you have got quite a history already with big names in the industry, like big magazines or big fashion brands, how is it actually that you, or how did it feel when you got into that kind of league, let's say, and how did you progress from being there? What is happening right now when you get booked, and how did you get there? Could you maybe dive into that a little bit?
For sure. So, I mean, when I started modeling, like my mom was actually a model, so I kind of followed in her footsteps, and I wouldn't say I was an overnight success. It took me a while actually, to get where I was with a lot of those jobs. It was hard for a while. Like there was probably a good like 2 to 3 year period where I was booking like jobs, but they were probably like a little bit like more mediocre, you know, and just spending a lot of time testing or just doing editorials and just kind of getting out there and stuff. But I feel like it's just consistency is key, you know, and I kind of just always had the mindset, like, even if someone was like, oh, like, I don't think this is going to work out for you, I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm not going to listen to you. I feel it's going to, so I'm just going to keep trying. And
did someone say that? Really?
Yeah, it's funny. I tell people this and I laugh about it now, but I actually went when I was, I want to say 19. I went to a local agency in Vancouver, which is like a decently well-known agency over there. And I remember I met the head booker and I went in there and This was before like anything ever took off for me because I started modeling full time when I was like 19. Um, and she was like, she's like, you're really beautiful, but I just don't think with your age you're ever gonna make it to New York or be able to book any big jobs. And I was like, okay.
Thank you so much.
um, yeah, and like, yeah, and she follows me on Instagram now, so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like
Yeah.
I could have listened to her, but I didn't, and I feel like that's really important for people because
Yes.
it's so important to remember that like other people's opinions like really don't matter,
That is so good that you say that, because I hear that all the time. People that get frustrated by one negative feedback of someone.
And I mean, it's human nature too, of course, like when that kind of stuff happens, you start to like think about that and you can kind of go down like a bit of a rabbit hole and a spiral. But I really think that like if you're passionate about something and you want to go after it, then just keep trying, because eventually something will come to fruition most times.
Absolutely. So what happened afterwards? So you went from that agency, obviously.
Yeah, no, so after that, my mom was a model. She was with IMG, and so I actually signed with a local agency here in Victoria, and they're wonderful people, but the whole time I was like, you know what? I want to be bigger than this, and like being with a local agency is just not going to get me anywhere. And so I told my mom, I was like, I want to go to New York.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. And so I ended up getting a mother agent at the time. And within 1 week, I had meetings in New York with like Elite, IMG, Ford, like all the big agencies you could really dream of. But obviously, going to New York as a new face with absolutely no portfolio or images that a New York market would like deem acceptable is incredibly hard. So I remember actually my very first meeting there was with Elite New York, and I met with the head there, and I remember they offered me a contract on spot, but everyone was like, oh, can we see your portfolio? And I was like, well, I don't really have any images right now. And I obviously needed to test. And of course, being Canadian with no work visa, it's very hard. So they had sent me to get work in Canada, because to get a US visa, you actually need like, now it's really hard. You need like 70 to 90 tear sheets, which for people listening, if they don't know what a tear sheet is, it's basically a page in a magazine.
All right.
So
that's kind of a challenge.
It's hard, and
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, and you need like letters from big clients to show that you've done a lot of jobs. And so I actually moved to Toronto because in Canada, the main markets I would say is probably Toronto and Montreal. And I also went to Europe because it's easy to get tear sheets and work there in a shorter amount of time. So I went to Toronto and I went back and forth from there in Europe, and I stuck it out a while, and I actually had a lot of success there. And my Canadian agency actually got me my first big job, which was a YSL Beauty contract, which was a really big deal to me at the time. And that's when things kind of started happening a little bit. And I started signing with more agencies, and then I went to Milan for a little bit. And then I shot another big job, which was in Canada. It was a Sephora campaign, which was really cool. And then all of a sudden, everything worked out and I got my visa for the States. And I was so anxious about it for so long because I wasn't sure if it was actually going to happen.
Yes, I believe. And
I had a friend who was a model and had done a lot of really big jobs and been all over Europe and stuff, and her visa was denied. So it was making me very anxious because it's like something you work very hard for, and you have an expectation of something, right? And if it doesn't happen, then what? So I ended up getting my visa, and then I went straight to New York after that.
That sounds really exciting. And first of all, I can feel your ambition and the belief that you have in yourself, which is super amazing, especially in that young age, because you have a role model, right, in your family. That is a big plus.
Yeah.
So she knows what it takes to get there, and she could definitely be kind of a mentor, or at least a buddy at your side to help you when you were in doubt or anxious, I believe.
Yeah.
And
I always say, I don't think I would have gotten where I did if it wasn't for my mom. Obviously, my dad's absolutely wonderful, but it's funny, like immigrant parent, he was like, you want to model like your mom did. And he was very against it. And I was like, no, like let me just try. But I would say from his side, he really instilled like a work ethic in me because he was trying to push me to work from like a very young age. But back to my mom, I really truly do not think I would have done half of the stuff I've done if it wasn't for her because modeling's hard, you know? It's like sometimes when
Yes.
you're 20 on the other side of the world in a country where you know nobody for work or on stay or something, it's like if you don't have a support system or maybe someone who really understands, it's really hard.
Absolutely. And especially in times like these days, where everything is public and online and everywhere,
Yeah.
I believe it is so crucial to be centered in yourself so that you don't get affected by negative comments or just the vibe of people that, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. There is so much
Yeah.
happening online, and people hide behind their profiles and just wait for someone that they can, I don't know, bully on or whatever. And
For sure.
did you have struggles with that in the beginning of your career?
You know what? I always say I was very lucky. I've had to, I will say I've been incredibly lucky throughout my modeling career. I have some friends who've had horrific experiences and I've only had a couple, which is obviously not, it's like two more than should be needed, but I would say online, not really, to be fair.
Yeah, okay, that is really good to hear because every once in a while I can see and feel that when meeting models on set or something that there's a certain, I don't know, but that just don't feel that happy about social media,
Yeah.
for example, and it's kind of pressure to
Yeah.
fulfill expectations, but I guess it's expectations that are in one's own head
Yeah.
rather than from anyone else. And so I was just curious if that has affected you in some way, because of
Yeah.
course you are very public as a model, and especially with your career level. How did that evolve over time?
I mean, it kind of comes with the territory. I mean, I've been rejected many, 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 many times. But I also, one thing I tell everybody, which I always keep in the back of my head, and when I say this, I don't say this from such a personal perspective. I mean, this isn't in regards to families or like loving your partner, your parents, but in a work aspect and definitely in modeling, no one cares about you as much as they care about themselves, you know?
Yeah.
So people aren't going home at the end of the day, clients, casting directors, agents, whatever, and like thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, you know? So I always kind of took that in the back of my head. And I mean, of course, I had lots of rejection. Like there was times where I was told like I was too skinny, which is very unheard of. But I remember there was a point where I got worked really hard, and this stress made me look very unwell, and that had been a thing. And there was one time I remember when I was in New York, and I got really insecure about it, and I would actually go to castings wearing like two pairs of pants just because I just didn't want someone to say something about it because it was starting to make me insecure, you know.
Hmm.
And then obviously, like, there's such an expectation on the girls to be in perfect shape all of the time, you know, like
Yes.
whether that's how amazing your skin is, or your nails, or your teeth, all that type of stuff. So you're basically picked apart a lot.
Yes.
And it was harder for me at the beginning, but I feel like I would just try to not go home and think about it so much. And I would try to think more about the positive things I had heard because there's always people in the back who are rooting for you, know. And I think having a really great support system and definitely an agency that really believes in you, and that even if the client has something horrible to say about you, or if the casting director didn't like you, they still believe in you. And I feel like that is very, very important, you know?
Absolutely. You know, I've been to so many shootings over the course of my career, and I have seen and heard things that I would have never imagined that could happen. And
Oh, yeah.
I mean, creative directors talking loud in the room that, hey, I really don't like what she looks like or he looks like, and uh, just super superficial, you know, and
Yeah.
so kind of mean, as if the model would be an object to, you know, judge.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can think that if you want, everybody can think whatever he wants, but that amount of kindness and gratitude that someone comes there, of course, the model is paid. At least it should be, right? And so when something like that happens, and I've seen that happen too to other creatives on set, you know, just people destroying the confidence of people on
Yes.
set by just having a rude comment and not thinking about something. I don't know why they do that, because they want to justify their position or whatever. And whenever I see that on set, I try to, you know, just connect with people, or just, you know,
Yeah.
give them that sense of warmth and ease, if you want to say
Yeah.
so. So did that did that occur to you or others on set as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously experienced that in times. I would say not so much as I've heard about, but there's definitely been times where, like, even in different countries, when you know they're talking about you, but they're talking about you in a language which you don't understand, so
Ah,
that deems it
okay.
as okay,
That's
obviously.
another
But
level, yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. But I think what a lot of these adult humans don't think about when they're speaking like that about young girls or men or whatever is these are people with feelings and self-esteem, and
Absolutely.
these are things they will not forget, and you can really, really mess someone's life up by saying horrible things, you know, and I just don't think it's ever acceptable. I feel like I hope it's changing. In my experience, it started to change. But I have a lot of friends. This is an interesting story, actually. So I'm going to say about 2 years ago, there was a girl, beautiful, beautiful girl, was posted with an agency in New York. I'm not going to name the agency, but it's a very well
Yes.
known agency. And they're like, welcome this girl to our curve board. And I'm telling you, this girl was absolutely not even 1% of what a beautiful curve model should be, you know?
Mhm.
She looked thinner than I am. And so I was like, is this like actually happening? Because one, I think how wrong is that to tell a young girl like that they're a curve model, which I think that things shouldn't even be deemed as in sizes.
Yeah.
Um and then number two is that's taking away the girls who are on the curve board, you know, who probably are being like, well, why are we on the same board? I just don't think that's correct. Anyways, so I remember seeing this and so many people were talking about it. And I commented and I was like, this is actually insane that you're saying this girl is a curve model. Like, this is absolutely insane. And I remember I shared it on my story, and I actually messaged the girl beforehand because obviously I didn't want to like do this without her permission or make her feel uncomfortable in any sense. And I was like, "Hey, like is it okay if I share this?" And she opened up to me and she's like, "Yeah, like it's been very upsetting, but my dream has been to be a model and this is what they said I am." And I think because she was super tall and maybe her measurements were a little bit wider than what they would deem as a main board model. Um, and once I did that, I started getting, there was like a 2 week period on my Instagram where I was overflooding with DMs. It turned into where I put a question box on my Instagram story. And I'm like, if you have had any similar experiences, tell them to me and I'll share them. And I had hundreds of messages from girls just being like, modeling has ruined my life. I can't even look in the mirror anymore. What I think is beautiful is not according to anybody else. And just people saying their whole teenage years and the start of their 20s were just ruined by really mean people commenting on their body and their looks. And I had girls being like, I don't think I'll ever be the same. And you know how hard, and I shared every single one. And it became overwhelming for me because I was like, wow, this is a real thing. And like, this is so sad, you know?
It is. And
Um,
are you still in contact with a few of them?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting. Some of the girls who even like reply because they wanted to share were some of my very, very, very good friends. Some like of my friends who I'm not friends with a lot of models. I will say that because I've tried to kind of separate my two lives. But the ones that I am friends with, some of them have had such horrible experiences. And it's so upsetting to me that people could be so evil. And I also just don't think happy people treat others like that. I don't know. I feel like I guess in some agencies and some lower agencies or anywhere, you know, there's people who kind of use being an agent as a power position where they feel
Hmm.
like they can talk down to somebody, you know, and
Yeah.
it's not right. And those things will last forever. And I can also see how it's almost affected my mental health in a way, just being so everyone kind of always judges your worth off of your looks, you know, for years and years and
Yes.
years. And it got
Yes.
to a point
Yes.
where like I started to be like, well, if I don't look this way all the time, am I not as worthy? And I caught myself thinking like that a couple years ago. And I'm like, this is so wrong because I bet no one else that like isn't a model thinks this way, but I would get really in my head about it and stuff. And so to me, that it just shows how much it like alters people's thinking when you're just put in this box and then just critiqued all of the time of how you shouldn't and shouldn't be.
I think it's so valuable that you speak about this, that you created that kind of safe space for the other models to connect with you and share the story, because I think it's so important to talk about this.
Yeah.
That's not even close to being acceptable that people get treated like that. And that's the same I think in as an artist, for example, you can get that kind of feedback by someone that is in a position that's higher than yours, maybe a creative director talking down to an art director, if you want to say so, and just dumping his disrespect, or
Yeah.
just just wanting to feel better himself, herself,
For sure.
to because they have a shitty day or whatever, and it's so easy to talk down to people and to make them. It's super important that you do that, because I think, especially in the model world, of course you're kind of judged by the cover, right?
Yeah.
And that is so important to underline that there's human beings everywhere in these positions, and I cannot understand why people do that, but I'm really happy that you address this, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's so important.
Yeah. Like I would, and I say too, like, not everyone's going to love you. Not everyone's going to think you're the most beautiful girl in the room. And not everyone's going to be your main supporter. But I think at the end of the day, if you're just kind, you've won, you know?
Yeah.
Because I feel like once you kind of stoop to that level, it's just like, what are you doing, you know? So, and I also think, like, especially in the modeling world, that personality can make someone a lot more beautiful. So I think just even being nice and stuff, because like a lot of people always ask me, like, oh, I want to model. Like, what's your advice? And I'm like, you know what? Just like be kind to everybody, show them your personality, because there could be the most beautiful girl in the whole entire world standing next to you. But if they are mean and rude, and no one's going to want to be around them, and they're not going to get rebooked for the job, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we're really deep in the mindset part already, I would love to ask you, when we had our first conversation, you said that you were kind of in a situation where you're feeling close to be burned out. And what do you, would you mind talking about what happened and what also got you out of that situation again?
Yeah, I mean, so I've never actually spoken about this publicly, not even on my Instagram. But I'll go into it
Just
for
as
sure.
just as far as it's comfortable for you.
No, 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 for sure. So yeah, basically, I would say so. There was a point. It was end of end of summer, and I was working a lot. There was some times where I was on 14 flights a week, and I was not really taking a break. And everyone was kind of like, you know what, like you should just take a little break, because I started really not to feel myself. I would start going to jobs and just being like, I don't want to be here. Or I would started going on planes when I boarded the flight, I would have a panic attack. Like I had to get off the plane and I didn't want to go to work, which was never really ever like me. And I got progressively worse, but I got to a point where I had shot a job and I was actually back in Germany, and I woke up the next morning and I had been really worked hard that week and I was not feeling myself at all. And I could kind of feel something coming on, but I woke up that morning and I couldn't lift my arms. It was like half my body was paralyzed, and it was really scary, obviously. And things started really down spiraling after that. And so I went back to Canada and everyone was like, you know what, like you should really take a break because you're starting to look a little unwell. And I just think that some time off would benefit you. And I kind of just didn't listen to anyone. And I kept getting asked for all these really cool jobs, that would come up. And I was having a hard time saying no to the money as well.
Hmm.
So I kept going and I kept pushing myself. But I got to a point where I started breaking out in stress rashes, like all over my face. I would show up to set and I would tell the makeup artist or the client, like, oh no, like my skin's actually good. I just had a reaction to the detergent on the pillow from the hotel. And everyone would believe me, but I knew that like I was having stress rashes because when everything was calm, I wouldn't get them. And basically, so that kept happening. And then I started not being able to sleep. I would wake up at like 2 a.m., like so incredibly hungry for no reason. I would wake up in panic attacks. And everything just kind of started down spiraling from that. And it ended up making me very, very, very unwell, where I had a lot of very uncomfortable symptoms arise to a point where I physically couldn't work anymore because I felt so ill. And so I took a while off of work. And basically, here I am now, just I'm recovering pretty much from all of that. And I've been able to do a bit here and there, but it's also put things into perspective for me a lot,
Yeah.
because there was a time after all that where I had worked so much and I had more money than I could ever wish for in my bank account. And I got a really nice place in LA and a brand new car, anything like people who like materialistic things would deem like amazing. But I can tell you, like, I sat in that condo in LA and like I cried every single night because of how horrible I felt. And then I was still getting so much pressure from my agents and stuff. And there was a time where I actually, because we were talked about when I rode horses earlier, so I stopped riding. And then 3 years after I went for my first ride back, I actually just wanted to take a break from work and like have some fun with my friends in LA. And first ride back, the horse threw me headfirst into the cement and I like lost my vision. I ended up in the hospital with a brain injury. It was really bad.
Oh my.
I remember my mom flew in and I was in very rough shape for a while. And literally, I was in a hotel in LA with my mom, just got released from the hospital. And my agency there at the time knew exactly what had happened. I was covered in bruises, like I couldn't walk. They had the audacity to ask me if I could go to a casting the next day.
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, you guys out
Absolutely.
of your mind right now? And it
Oh
just goes
my.
to show that like not everyone always has your best interest. Sometimes they just see dollar signs.
Yeah, true. And wow. First of all, thank you for being so open about this. And now that you said how severe it was, how did you move on from there? What were your
I
what did
mean,
you tell yourself?
I honestly, at the beginning, I think it was so hard for me to understand what was happening and why it was happening. And I think I could reflect on how horribly I was treating my body. And I've not been a victim of this situation, you know, like it was all self-inflicted. And I was aware of what I was doing, you know, and I should have listened to my body, and I didn't. But when it got so bad to the point where like I didn't even have enough energy to walk to the kitchen, or I would get such bad body aches where I was up all night crying in pain, or like it got to a point where my body created an immune response. I couldn't eat anything. Like it was like I'd have anaphylactic shock every single day. And it was really scary, and I obviously didn't know what was going on. And then living in that state, which all happened honestly within a 2-week period, I went from like working and traveling the world to being like that. It was so hard for me to comprehend that what was going on, you know? And so I think it was something that needed to happen, and I kind of had to go through all of that and just like sit with it and be like, you know what, like this is self-inflicted, and like I will be okay. But it was very, very hard mentally. But I feel like as time has gone on, obviously, it's just made me think about things a lot differently in life and in work, and how I want to really spend my time and just do jobs that are very special and important to me, and not just taking any job just because of the dollar amount, you know?
Yes.
And how like I really want to live my life and like go with my career moving forward, you know? But yeah, it was very, very hard to accept. And then obviously trying to explain that what had happened to agencies and clients, and having to turn down insane jobs. Like it was so, I think the hardest thing on me at the time was I was like, okay, well, like I physically can't work right now because of how unwell I am and how unwell I look. And then it's like, hey, are you available for this Dior campaign? And I was just like, why is this happening? You know, which now I'm like, I don't care about the work. Like my health is so much more important, you know? But it was very, very, very difficult at the beginning of all that to kind of process like what was going on.
I can understand. That is, I think, you know, me personally, I don't believe in coincidences, and I believe that everything that happens for a reason that is in the end is good for you. That is my strong
For
belief.
sure.
And so, of course, if you say that you had to turn down these jobs, and that you were in a situation where you honestly really were not physically able to do anything, that is like I have been in a similar situation once, where I was working like a maniac, and I had a really interesting job that I wanted to work on, and I had a headache that has been around for a couple of days already that didn't really explain to me why it was there, and then no painkillers were helping and nothing. And eventually a neighbor of mine, he told me that you should go and see a doctor. There's two things that I can think of, and so you should probably go. And I said, it's just headaches, and I will have another painkiller, and it's going to be fine. Then I went to the doctor, and she said, you have to go to the hospital right away. And I went there, and they said that, oh, this looks really bad. So they took some brain water out of my spine, and said that, you should probably call your wife and tell her that this is really serious, and you should arrange whatever is necessary. And I was like, okay, maybe I can ask her to bring my my computer and my graphic tablet so that I can continue working. That was in my head, right? And so I did that, and she brought it, and because she didn't know what was going on, and the doctor came in, and he just grabbed me and shook me like I don't know. He just really shook me really hard and said, don't you understand what I just said?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. And then he told me, and then it clicked. And the following 6 weeks were really hard. There was a big brain fever, and it just didn't look well. And I needed that punch in the face to understand that life and nothing is more important than your health and your family and your life, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's two kinds of people: that ones that see it coming and the ones that need the kick in the face. And
That's so
I
true.
was definitely one of the second.
Yeah.
And but then I changed so much, like my nutrition, my stress levels, my work ethics, and that has helped to eventually speak about this. And that is one of the reasons why actually I started this podcast, because I wanted to bring people together that kind of help each other by sharing experiences. And it's so valuable what you just said, especially because this is a job where you work with all you got, right? So everything, like your body,
Yeah.
your mind, you have to work on point, and you have to function, and there's so much more than just the body. And I think it is so valuable to share these learnings that you had, and that makes you so much stronger to help others and to
Yeah.
be yourself and know your own worth and know your limits. And I believe that this will be the foundation of your next level.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but you know what, it's very true everything you said, and I also believe that everything happens for a reason, like I really live by that, and I know that usually when you go through something so hard, there's always a greater outcome no matter what it is, but I feel like a lot of what I went through is you kind of like when you're feeling good, you kind of think you're invincible, right? And
Yeah,
I feel like once you kind of get in that mentality of like nonstop, you're so programmed like that. But when something kind of hits you in the face like that, it's like, whoa, okay, like maybe I'm not so invincible, And that was something that was like, especially for me, I'm very like passionate about health and taking care of myself. And then
mm-hmm.
I thought I would be like the last person to ever end up in that situation, and it's also something I've been incredibly private about, especially on social media, which number one goes to show how fake social media is. But
Yes,
it's also something I was like, you know what, I'm going to save this for a time and I'm going to do maybe like a full video on it, which like I don't want sympathy. Like that's not why. But the way I look at it is if I could help one person, that's all. I've done something.
yes, that's the most
Um,
important thing.
for sure, because if I feel like if I was going through what I was going through, and if I had just maybe heard one person go through something like a little bit similar, it would have made it that much easier, because once you can relate to someone, it just kind of it does something where you're like, okay, well, like maybe I will be okay, maybe I will get out of this, because when you're in like the depths of something, it's hard to see your way out.
Absolutely, you don't see that at all, I
Yeah.
think, and because you don't realize you're in that situation in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, and it really shows like if I've learned anything from all of this is how much stress can do to somebody and how it can affect the body and the mind, because I never really thought about this type of stuff. And I mean, everyone handles stuff differently
Yeah,
in their life, like some people live in insanely stressful situations all the time and they're not really affected, or maybe it hasn't manifested in that way yet. But especially for me being so hypersensitive to everything, I've noticed after of going through all that how sensitive I am to things, and it's really just made me like be a lot more grateful for health and my body and life in general, because things can be very scary. I had a very random, I've never spoken about this either, but in December I had a really 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 scary health scare which came out of absolutely nowhere.
mhm.
Um and that made me feel like I was ungrateful for what I was going through before, if that makes sense, because of how
Yeah.
scary it was.
Oh,
Um So you never really think about those things unless you're in that situation, you know? And now I catch myself like getting upset about something and I'm like, why am I upset about this? Like this is so minuscule to like real problems, you know? And even me talking about like what I went through and everything, like in a sense, yeah, sure it's valid, but like that is also minuscule to what some other people go through, you know? So like I always try to remind myself of that.
Yes, of course, it helps to set things into perspective. But in the end,
Yeah.
if something like that happens, it is very important to understand how to cope with it and how to move on. Because, well, I don't know about you, but when I have had that kind of situation, I was thinking about, eventually I thought about why did this happen? What did I
Yeah.
miss? Um, what can I do better? And so I started experimenting many things, like doing more sports again, or
Yeah.
just finding more inner calmness. And that
Yeah.
is actually something that I eventually found. A friend of mine, he was really deep into meditation, and
Mhm.
he just helped me to first. He actually he was my dentist, and he became a
Oh.
friend. But then he stopped being a dentist and pursued his second professional career as a shaman, and also
Oh
someone that is
wow.
really into helping people finding inner peace. And that
Yeah.
was another thing that is so helpful for me to understand how my inner world actually looks like, what I can find there, and how to reset, like, or how to, there's this for everyone that is not really into meditation. When someone asks me, I always say that for me, if I want to explain this to you, that would be the clear blue sky is always there, and the clouds in front of the clear blue sky, these are thoughts or
Yes.
beliefs or whatever, and you can let them go and you can actually observe what you're thinking. So you are not your thoughts, and that image has helped me a lot to understand that I don't have to believe what's going on in my head right now, and
For
I
sure.
I don't have to overvalue things that are happening at that very moment, because things will pass. But it's very hard if you set expectations on yourself, or you have others, in your case, putting these expectations on you to work for them, uh,
Yeah.
in or function for them. And so is that something, or what is it that got you out of that?
Out of that, like, I mean, I think I just had to come to peace with everything. And
Hmm.
I was just like, because I was fighting it for so long, you know, like, I feel like when you fight things, the worse it gets. Because, like, I always say, like, expectations are the cause of all suffering in all aspects of life, you know? And so I would tell my agents, no, like, give me 2 weeks, like, I'll be okay. Like, I would keep saying that. And I would put such insane pressure on myself where I'd be like, I have to feel okay by this day. And then if I didn't, I just felt awful, you know? So it wasn't until I was like, you know what? I just gonna let go of everything. I feel like the most important thing someone can do in their life is surrender. There's a really good book. It's called The Surrender Experiment, and it's very, very interesting. It's about
All right.
he's a very he's a very well known author, but he went through something really horrible for 10 years, which he thought was never going to end. And once he got out of it, it was the most incredible thing started happening for him, you know? So I just once, yeah, so basically once I just kind of surrendered to everything and I was like, you know what? No one and nothing is going anywhere, and whatever's meant for me will not pass me by. And that is something I strongly, strongly live by, is like what is meant for someone will not pass them by. So I was like, okay, this is meant to be happening right now. So what am I supposed to do? I just have to accept it. So once I started accepting it and was just also being honest with people too, you know, and I think the hardest thing is I was just basing so much of like who I was around my career and not just, hey, I'm actually just like me, like that's not everything. And just started trying to enjoy my life more and things that like actually made me happy and connected me to maybe what I enjoyed before all of this happened. And once I started putting emphasis on that, I started kind of just being at peace with everything more. And I will say, I've been absolutely incredibly lucky with my support system within my career. They have been nothing but patient with me, supportive, and I feel like in the modeling industry that is something you don't ever really come across.
Yeah.
So I'm eternally grateful for that.
That is so cool. So cool to hear.
Yeah.
That reminds me a lot of the conversation I recently had with Quentin Decaye. He's a fashion and beauty photographer from Switzerland. And he said exactly the same. He had that really strong family support system that kept him going through all the challenges that came across. And actually, you just answered the question from my previous guest, Joanne O'Neill. She's a hairdresser from Belfast, and she asked exactly that. So thank you for that already, and it was really insightful to. And I wrote down the surrender experiment. I will check that out, and we will definitely put that into the show notes because it sounds really interesting, that concept, and I'm really curious about that already.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great book. I started reading a lot too. And it's so interesting, like you are not your thoughts, like when you say that. It really resonates because I think about that a lot because a lot of people people get like scared of their thoughts.
Yeah.
And so and most people, even me, like people catastrophize, like think of the worst outcome, like, oh, what if I'm not going to get through this and all of that. So I feel like so that's why I started reading those types of books, and especially that one, it kind of makes you think like, okay, you know what, like it is going to be okay. And I feel like just even believing something is half of the job.
Yes, absolutely agree on that. And hey, we've been talking about emotions and experiences, especially those kind of not so really nice experiences a lot. But, I want to touch on a very positive emotion. You sent a really beautiful picture that I would love for us to talk about a little moment. There's this tradition in this podcast that my guests send pictures that have a very special emotional meaning to them. And you were so kind to send a picture of you and your mom. And of course, we will show that image on the respective social post. But would you mind telling why this is so important for you, this image, or why does it have that special meaning to you?
Yeah, so basically, that was a trip to New York where I was so lucky to be able to bring my mom to New York with me. I think because in hindsight, like my whole modeling career and everything, and even since I was a kid, my mom's always been my biggest supporter. Like no matter what, like would never get mad at me, even if I made a huge mistake or something, was just like always so there for me. So once I started working a lot and I moved, I never really got to spend much time with her. Um, and so, but like that one trip, I was able to take her to New York with me. And I think that was when I had just moved to New York and we were able to spend a week together. And it was cool because I was able to bring her to like set with me and to like agency meetings. And obviously, her having been a model for so long, I think it was really special for her to be able to kind of like relive all of that. And I have a very special relationship with my mom. She's like my whole world. She's like my best friend. I always tell her, I always tell everyone, I'm like, my mom's like my soulmate. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I believe in life, you have like many different types of soulmates, but she's definitely one of them. And just being able to kind of bring her back to something that she used to experience, but now I'm there doing it and kind of be there together was just very special to me.
Oh, yeah. And I believe she's very, very proud of you. And so is your dad. Imagine your dad having like two very successful models in his very close family. That's kind of rare.
I think he just rolls his eyes, to be honest.
Well, anyhow, I think that is what you just said about your mom. That is so nice, and I really appreciate you having that close connection with her. And I believe that it is very, very powerful to her to be able to be there for you and give you that kind of support and feedback and traveling with you. I recently, when we started working together on that project, we started following each other, and I was able to see what you were doing every now and then, and it was really nice to see actually that much of your mom with you, and that you were traveling together, and that really made me smile. And I'm happy that you shared this with the creative family. It's really powerful.
Yeah. No, it's been really nice, especially the last 2 months I've actually been able to spend with my mom, which have been amazing. Obviously she's back in Sweden now, but it's been so nice. I'm so incredibly lucky to have her. And obviously my dad too, because I don't know if he'll listen to this, but he'll be like, what about me?
Yeah, well. And yes, so that's really cool. Thank you for sharing this.
Of course.
And now I would love to give you, there's always, I try to get some surprise feedback for my guests from people up from the network. And since we have been doing that cover together for Vogue Magazine, which was also, as you said, something that you ticked off your bucket list, I thought it would be nice to give you some feedback from Ava Pivot, the photographer. And I would love to play to you if you don't mind.
Sure, I would love that.
So here she comes.
Okay.
When you love animals, especially horses, and you have dogs in your studio like me, it takes only a few seconds to connect with Billy and find yourself like talking to a good old friend you only did not see for a while. She's so sweet, easy, and down to earth. Wonderful to work with her.
Aw, yes, that's so sweet. It's funny though, because I remember showing up at set, and I had just gotten off a really long flight, and I was so tired, and I remember I walked to the studio in the morning, just try to wake myself up. I think call time was like 7 or something, and I remember I just felt she was so, so wonderful. I remember she had her children there and her dogs, and it just felt like I was at home, like while they were at the studio while I was getting hair and makeup done, and like I remember her husband was there and like brought a beautiful breakfast. It was just so nice.
Yeah, Ava is really lovely. We recently met in Düsseldorf for the first time, and I've been working with her for many projects already, but we have been discussing everything through the internet, and we've been having very long retouching sessions together, which was really nice to not be alone, and we're just discussing everything. And yes, I relate to that. She's really nice, and she definitely wanted to give you some feedback.
Aw, so sweet. No, I love that. She's great.
Thank you.
That's another thing where, like, I will say, throughout my career, I have met so many wonderful people, and like, I mean, lifelong friends just from meeting someone on set.
Yeah, well, that of course, and that is so exciting, right? As I told you, I was working in the creative industry for quite some time now, and I was so lucky to meet so many interesting people that have either very interesting life stories, or are just fun to be with, or we were sharing the weirdest work situations, and that's what it is about, to be open to meet new people. And I think in that creative fashion beauty industry, you meet so many people that are interesting and have been traveling the world and have got stories to tell.
Yeah.
And of course sometimes it stays a bit because you don't meet for such a long time, but sometimes you connect instantly, right? And you find someone that you want to connect with on a more deeper level. And yeah, that's exciting. It's an exciting world.
For sure, because it's funny you say that. So I have a best friend, Natalie, and she, like, I call her my wife. She's like my sister. Like, I feel like we were like meant on this earth for each other, to be like best friends for life. And I had really weird situational like life happen, and I ended up at this job, which I wasn't really supposed to be at, and she was at the job, and just from ending up there, I made like a lifelong best friend, which is really, really, really special, you know? And I feel like, especially maybe when you're in the same industry, you can connect with people like a little bit different. And life is so much about connection as well, too. And so I feel like when you're able to come across those types of things, especially in a work environment, it's very meaningful.
It is. I think by working in the creative industry, I met two of my very best friends. And they are actually not here in Germany. They are living in Helsinki, in Finland.
Oh.
And so we connected because one of them was having an exchange here while we were in education still. And I knew that I was going to go to Helsinki for a month. And so I told him that, hey, when you're here, I will show you Düsseldorf. And how about you show me a bit of your town when I'm coming there?
Yeah.
And I think that way I met a few other people in Helsinki out of his bubble, and that meant that I also got to meet the next people that were coming to Düsseldorf, and so it continued, and it happened that this became a really big part of my life, and I'm really thankful for that. It's so special to have people that you can, even if you don't see them that often. You can connect with them in a heartbeat, and either continue where you left off years ago when you saw each other the last time, or you just we jump on the phone and or on video calls nowadays. When we started connecting, there was no video call, so it was really exciting to connect, and I believe that. You and your friend Natalie, and that it's so special to have this. It's super
sure.
Super
Yeah,
nice.
life is so interesting how so many situations lead you to another, right? And how you meet people.
Yes, exactly. And I want to, if you don't mind, move on to a question from the creative community. I just picked one that I found was a really interesting one that would also lead to us speaking a bit about social media.
Yeah.
And it was Jen that asks, you're having a very large social following, and how much of your private life are you willing to share? And what is a no-go? And how do you deal with the expectations that are in the social world?
I love this question, actually, because I actually choose to be pretty private on social media, I would say. Where some people, like, they share their whole lives on there, but something that's very important to me is keeping my private life off of social media.
Yes.
I think someone said this to me once, and it's a really good analogy, and especially like in relationships, but like I'll use a relationship for example where I have not always been public with people I've been with on social media, because I feel like when you have a world with someone, you're kind of just like in your own little bubble. You have your own world together. But once you kind of open it up for the world to see your other people, your bubble starts getting a little bigger, and it's all of a sudden not so sacred anymore. And I really think about that kind of stuff in regards to social media. So, I mean, of course, like I'll post like my family or like travels and stuff on there, but my private life, that is something that I just want to keep for myself, and I don't feel the need to overshare on Instagram. I feel like Instagram and social media is it's a validation platform, and I feel like if you feel the need to overly post certain things, you're kind of wanting it for some sort of validation, which I mean, everyone posts on there. Like, obviously, like I post like photos of myself on there. Like I'm not saying I don't do that, but I feel in regards to my personal life, it's just something I choose to keep private. And I've had situations in the past where I didn't keep things private, and maybe unwanted opinions from people came about, and it's just unwanted noise sometimes,
Yeah, and it doesn't bring value to your day or to you at all, right? Because when you share, no, when you decide not to share private, I'm handling it the same way. I don't want to post anything about myself other than me work related, or sometimes things that I do with people from my network. That's okay, but I don't want to spend time sharing things about my family or my son, for example. I don't want people. That's not interesting to them. I don't want to share that. That's precious private life, right? And so that is something that is, I think, is a very good decision for you, especially because there's a lot of people following you, and they want to see, of course, what you're doing and where you are. And of course, I can imagine that there will be questions like, are you seeing someone, or what, all those kind of things that don't really belong to the public.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, I obviously do get that a lot, and it used to be this whole thing for a long time. People would be like, why are you so mysterious on social media? And people would always say it to me too, like, oh, you're so mysterious. Like, and I'm like, it wasn't intentionally at first, because it's interesting. The first thing people will ever say to me when they meet me is, you're nothing what I would have expected off your social media. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, you're just like a lot more down to earth or personable. And I'm like, it's interesting you say that, but it's interesting to me how people are so easy to judge just off of like photos and stuff, and how it just goes to show how like fake social media is in a sense.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think, when we spoke last time, I said that it's such a highlight reel and false realities. And what do you think are the risks and the benefits of social media?
I think humans are the problem. I don't think social media is the problem. I think there's I think there's a lot of benefits to it, and there's a lot of disadvantages of it. It depends how you use it, I think it can be very unhealthy if you spend copious amounts of time on there comparing yourself to others, because it's so easy to go on there and be like, oh my God, like, look at their life, or like where they're going. Something I have struggled with a lot. It's better now, but in the past, even when I was working and stuff and I didn't have a lot of time, is I would get really bad FOMO, like fear of missing out, because I would see someone like on a beautiful trip in like Italy where like I wish I was, or like with my friends and stuff, and it would make me really anxious, and I would keep seeing all this on social media. So that was like a disadvantage for me, I feel like, when I would spend too much time on there. And it's so easy I find it so silly because everyone knows it's such a highlight reel, because everyone on there is curating such an image of themselves to look a certain way and a life that's a certain way, when I tell you it's really not like that. And I know a lot of people who look one way on social media and then their life's really not like that. And not that that's a bad thing, but I feel like, me knowing that, I still don't even put that to like my knowledge sometimes, like I'll catch myself being like, oh wow, like look at this. But I'm like, no, but like I know this is fake. So I feel like I always have to kind of remind myself of that. But in terms of like benefits of it, I've had a lot of incredible opportunities because of Instagram. I've met some of my best friends. Like, I've even had a very long relationship because of a random DM slide,
That's interesting.
So I know. So there are obviously benefits to it. And you can really use it in a powerful way to create a really cool life for yourself. I've been able to create a thing where I've gotten a lot of opportunities because of my social media, which has done a lot for me, and I'm very, very grateful of it. Like, for instance, like I worked with a couple like really beautiful hotels in Europe the last few weeks, where we worked together. I just made some content for them, and I was able to take my mom on like a week-long beautiful trip through Europe, which she probably has not been able to do in an incredibly long time, and I'm really grateful that I'm in the position on social media to be able to do that type of stuff.
Sure.
So there's definitely advantages of it. So I can't hate on it so much because there's even people or there's jobs or there's been clients
Of
who have
course.
reached out via social media. Even my current manager reached out via social media, you know? So it's like, as much as I'm like, oh, you know, like Instagram's so bad, it sucks.
No,
It's like,
no, and that's not even
I
where I
can't
wanted
hate
to
on it
go.
that much.
No, sure. And didn't want to go there. I was just, you know, when talking about social media, of course, for people like creatives or for people like you, especially you, I think that's a very valuable platform to reach audience that is
Yeah.
interested in working with you or that is just, you know, curious about what happens in the world. And that's absolutely fine. Where I wanted to go was when we talk about social media, I think you pretty much more than anyone else know how to handle this and how to work with
Yeah.
it. But there are people that don't and that see the life of others, as you just mentioned, and that maybe are not that experienced in life or that are, you know, for example, young girls, right? So you are a role model for young women in a way, of course. And has it ever happened that you realized or that you noticed that they are like, I don't know, too much in comparison, or that they don't know how to handle this? And is there anything, do you feel a responsibility for young girls and people?
In some sense, yes, because I mean, I'm particular with what I post on Instagram these days, obviously, and because anyone can see it, you know, and I just try to be my most self on there and just keep things as close to what's special to me as possible, if that makes sense, like more in regards to like posting stories and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely times where like I'll get a lot of DMs from young girls like asking me like, oh, like how do I become a model, or how do I do what you do, and all this type of stuff, you know? And it's hard because it's like you almost don't want to give a young girl advice to lead them down a path which could potentially really affect their mental health, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I'm always so careful to where I say anything. Like I've even had parents reach out to me and be like, hey, could you help me guide my kid this way? And I'm like, well, what am I
Wow.
supposed to do? So like I don't always reply to all these, but
No.
I do try to reply to people like as much as I can, because I also don't want to seem like I think I'm like too good to like open my DMs, because it's not true. So anytime like people do try to ask me questions and stuff, I always ask. But yeah, I mean, it I guess I never really thought about it that way, but I guess there is a fine line to which should be posted on there. Yeah, I also try to like really, because I've gotten a lot of questions being like, oh, like what's your like diet and fitness routine like, or how do you eat, like can you tell me what you eat in a day, because I want to maybe look like you. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that like everyone's biochemistry is incredibly different, you know, the way they eat will not
Yes.
work for the person next to them. And like a lot of models work out with like athletes too. Like it really, and some don't, you know, so it really depends. So like, I never want to give that information like out on Instagram, because it's like, hey, listen, I can eat this way, but you might not feel and look good if you ate this way, and vice versa, you know? So
Absolutely. And
I feel like there's a lot. I think one issue, and especially because like I did go to school for nutrition, one thing I see on Instagram a lot is I enjoy watching them too, or even on TikTok. It's like what I eat in a day videos, which is great and all, but I feel like sometimes they can be very misleading and kind of lead girls or boys, anyone, you know, down a path of which is potentially going to affect their health. And there's even like a lot of, I'm kind of going off now, but there's even a lot of people on there who have absolutely no medical degrees, and they're like, oh, you should take these supplements. I'm like, no, you shouldn't. Like, you shouldn't be like broadcasting this information on there, you know?
yes, thank you. You say that. It's so annoying to find all these kind of things in advertisings and everywhere, and people are just, I don't know, holding the next meal shake into the camera, and
I know, and
the
it's
next
like
diet of this and
this.
blah and this and
I
well,
know.
I'm happy you mentioned that because you have a solid background in nutrition, right? And so that is a super interesting topic, I think, to of course point out that this might not work for you because you might digest maybe fat or sugar other in another way than maybe someone else, and or yeah, but we can get very deep into that, I think, but that is possibly another discussion. But it's super interesting. And is there anything that you would like to add to this from your perspective?
Yeah, it's just that like if I could say if I could give one advice to people is listen to your body. Your body is so intelligent and it knows what makes you feel good and it knows what makes you feel not good, you know? And I feel and like your body is healing when you're not even thinking about it, you know? So there's been times where like I have eaten a certain way and years ago before I really figured out what worked for my body, which some people eat that way and they feel absolutely amazing and they look phenomenal, but it made me feel not great, you know? So I always, if I can say anything to anybody, I'm like, prioritize whole foods, things that make you feel really good, like good sources of protein and stuff. And don't eat one way because you think like this influencer looks this way because they eat X, Y, and Z all day. Like it's just
Yes.
listening to your body is so, so important. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that. And I feel like a lot of people also don't realize maybe how crappy they do feel until they change it up a bit.
That's really powerful. Thank you.
Of
And
course.
well, I think we covered quite a lot of topics, and I do have one more thing that I would love to quickly discuss with you before we go
Yeah.
into the quick fire questions, and that is about that is actually a thing that I am personally thinking about a lot, and
Hmm.
because it's part of my profession, and me working as a retouch artist for all sorts of different projects, especially in beauty and hair productions, clients, especially clients, demand, or maybe used to demand, but there's a tiny change on the horizon, I feel,
Yeah.
that things are getting retouched or let's say reshaped in a way that I think is completely out of the line.
Yeah.
Me personally, I never want to reshape people unless it's specifically demanded or if it's a thing that, for instance, is just because of the angle of the camera, that some shoulder is really big or something because it's close to the camera and things like that. That's all right. That's all right. But things happen that are completely unnatural. And how do you feel about that? Is there a change coming, and or will it get worse? Because when we think about especially apps that we have on our phones that
Yeah.
maybe by default optimize human faces without telling you, right? And so there
Yeah.
are some apps that just change the way your skin looks or your jawline looks.
Yeah.
And what does this do to people and their image of themselves, right? It's one thing in commercial, in the commercial world, or in maybe in the fashion world, but what does it do to the private world? And these were two questions. So the first one was, do you see a change in the commercial industry, and is there something that
You know, I do see a change, you know, and because you will see now they're shooting like big campaigns with maybe unretouched skin, or you see like different like heights or body shapes. Like, you know what? It is definitely changing the industry, I think, but I think within the fashion industry, I don't think it's changing for the right reasons, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think that there is a 1% of the world who looks a certain way and the rest cannot relate to it. And I feel like as they're trying to please consumers, they're trying to use that as marketing, if I'm going to be completely honest, because there's a lot of demand from people being like, oh, well, why is there not more plus size models on the runway? And I even hate saying the word plus size. Like, I just feel wrong saying it because I feel like people should not be deemed into categories. Or like people with more natural skin. And like, well, I think it's amazing because 99% of the time, like people do not look perfect like that, you know? And no one's skin looks perfect all the time. So I feel like it puts such like an unhealthy image out there. And I definitely do think there is change, but I do question if it's for the right reasons, you know, or if they're just using it as a marketing ploy to attract, to please the consumers of the world, you know, and to make more money. Because at the end of the day, that's like everyone's motive is usually behind a lot of those big brands is we want to make more money and like what is the best aspect we can head in our marketing, you know?
Sure. And yeah, well, I see that too in a couple of brands that I work with, that they definitely went back a bit from this hyper perfection, and it's very well received from my end that they, you know, I want to have the personality of the people in those images, and I want to actually see in the end what the photographer has captured and to tell that story. And I love enhancing what couldn't be captured in the camera to bring a certain mood or tell a story, but the story is not told by over retouched people. And you know, especially, well, of course there is a slight difference. There are some projects like, I don't know, commercial campaigns for skincare. Of course, that is a bit different.
Of course, yeah.
That's a bit different. But then again, even there, I can feel it, and I'm really happy about that. But the thing that I was really confronted with a couple of times recently was that there was the demand of changing the shapes of the faces and stuff like that, and I wasn't really sure where that came from. And
and it's like because like there's been a couple jobs I've shot and they have photoshopped my face and I'm like, I don't look like that. Like that is not me. And I'm like, but why would they even do that? You know, I'm like, what are you trying to achieve? Like that doesn't even look good.
Yeah.
And so I always wonder what the motive is behind it, you know, like because I guess whoever is behind like the image they want, they're the ones kind of being like, hey, like it has to look this way, but not everyone agrees with their vision, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great that things are like evolving and I hope they continue to do so, because I feel like I even feel for like people's mental health it'll be so much better because they're not going to be just so.
Yeah, but why? What is that thing about these filters that people use, especially in social media?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it kind of just, I think it boosts people's egos, to be honest. You know, like, social media is a thing where, like, you can kind of hide behind, and if you want to alter your body or look this way or that way, you can. And then, but I just don't think it's good either, because, like, once you start to do that, it's like, then you're going to start being like, oh, well, like, maybe I made my nose smaller and like your nose doesn't actually look like that in real life, and that's just like not really healthy. Like I think everyone is so beautiful just the way they are, like, you know, I like you were, and like I'm not against cosmetic surgery or that, like I'm not one for it personally, but like if that's what people want to do, like that's wonderful. But I think that everyone is put on the earth just as they are, and like everyone is just beautiful as they are. And going on social media and just kind of having to create a unrealistic like image of yourself is just not healthy.
Absolutely. I think social media has been invented to be fun and actually to share cat videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
because that is, no, I meant, just to be honest, just kidding. But the thing is, I really like humor and people that are, don't taking things too serious and
Yeah.
just sharing a laugh, or, just something that brings light into the day of others. And
For
it's
sure.
not about this comparing stuff or look at what I got and look where I am and blah, blah, blah. Because this is so, I don't know, exchangeable. Like, it's not
Yeah.
interesting, but if you get inspired by someone, motivated by someone, I think that is the true power of social media, rather than the downside that is also very relevant, sad to say, but that having people like feeling not as worthy or not as valuable. But yeah.
And I think it's like people love people who are relatable, and I'm like, and I will say, like, I don't think I'm the most relatable person on Instagram, because like I choose to like not post that much on there, like real life stuff, and I've kept it in regards pretty professional. So like I'm not saying I am, but for instance, like I love watching like videos of influencers or just like anyone in general who's just like very relatable to normal things, and I think that's where the fun in social media should be, not all this like emphasis on like, oh, like I want to be like the hottest girl on here, like something like that. Like that is boring at the end of the day, like people
Yeah,
like
and it will fade.
want to, yeah, and people want to know why you're you, like what makes you interesting, and so I feel like there's a lot of disconnect within that. But like again, I feel like society is the issue and they put a lot of emphasis on that, and I also will say, I feel like going back into social media, I know this is a bit off topic, that it's very unhealthy for relationships, because I feel like a lot of people start comparing their own personal relationships to what they see on social media, which is like not real life. And I think it's also made it very hard for people to, I never really like, I don't really date much, but I have friends who have a lot of like issues and stuff, because it's almost like people go on Instagram or stuff. It's like they're all like online shopping, or they're with someone. They're like, oh, like this person looks better on a phone screen. So it starts messing with people's heads, but like you have absolutely no idea what their real life is like. And I think that it ruins a lot of like things that could be incredibly special.
So Billy, now that we finished talking about the serious topics, right? I would love for us to go into the quickfire questions, because that is always something where people that are listening can find direct take-home value, some inspiration, and some things to take away. So what would be your statement on a large billboard if you could put one?
My statement on a large billboard, if I could put one. Okay, I have one. Okay. But mine would be, you'll never be better at being anybody else but yourself.
What is your favorite fun hobby?
My fun hobby? This sounds silly. I like to make ice cream.
Are you making it yourself?
I like make like vegan ice cream. Yeah, it's like a thing where like I'll like, yeah.
So what could the next generation do better than you?
Be less judgmental, because I don't think people understand what has gone into someone's life, what's gone on in someone's life, or what's brought to them to where they are, where someone is judging them in such a harsh way.
Yeah. What would you love for your peers to think or say about you on your 80th birthday?
That I was kind always, and I was always someone could rely on.
What do you believe in that others might call crazy?
I feel like people need to look at their living environments I think people underestimate how toxic the environments around them are, and not a lot of people pay attention to that.
Which celebrity or band would you like to meet and why?
Okay. Mine would actually be an author. It would be Michael Singer. I don't think a lot of people know who that is, but he's written some really incredible books. And I feel like if I could I like to pick people's brains, you know? So I feel like
Yes.
that is someone who I'd want to meet and pick their brain.
What is easier for you to say no to today than a few years ago?
Things that don't serve me. I feel like before I'm quite a people pleaser, and I used to always put everyone before myself, but I feel like in the more recent times I can say no to things that are not going to be a benefit of me.
What is your favorite book that you gave as a gift to someone and why?
So there's a book called The Wisdom of Sundays. It's actually by Oprah, and I always tell people to listen to it on Audible. And she interviews about 6 of my favorite authors who've written some really incredible books about their journeys and stuff. And I've recommended it to a few people and they said it's changed their lives. So it would be The Wisdom of Sundays, but listen to it on Audible because you have to listen to the actual live interviews.
Amazing. Okay. It's on my list already. What are your 3 favorite apps on your smartphone?
Okay, it's a good question. I would say Notes because I love literature and I like to write, and I will sometimes get writings or thoughts in my head and I want to write them down quickly, and I mean my phone is always there if I don't have pen and paper. And then Photos because I obviously love to take photos, and I would say Spotify because I love music very, very, very much.
It's very interesting that I get these answers a lot, like Notes, and but I think you were the first one to say Photos. But Spotify definitely is one of the all-time top 3, I think. So last one of the quickfire question is, what makes you happy?
My family, people I love, and the ocean.
Oh, yes. And you said that.
I'm very attached to water. I'm very attached to the ocean. I think growing up on an island, it's a part of me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I guess that is a very cool experience to live close by the ocean, and especially on an island. Not everybody can say that. And I always wanted to live by the beach, or at least close, but has not happened yet. But
it's okay, it'll happen. Anything's possible.
I know. And that's definitely on our bucket list to go and live where the sea is. All right. So I just had one thing that we didn't touch on, but I wanted to at least ask you. There's a project that you're currently working on, and would you love to share a bit about your fashion brand that you created, Sentiments?
For sure. Yeah. So basically, it was during COVID, and I wanted to create. Always wanted to create something. You know, I also feel like have modeling stuff, it's kind of put me in a position where I could kind of branch myself out a bit. And so I just didn't want to do anything. I wanted to do something I'm really passionate about. And I love literature. I love words. I think they're so powerful, but so simple. And even just a few lines from a song can make you feel so much. So I wanted to be able to incorporate fashion and literature. So I created all organic. And I'm very passionate about materials and sustainability where I can. So everything is completely organic, and I had original writings embroidered on pieces, and it's really cool. You know, it's turned into something really special for me. This campaign we actually shot in Germany, and I wanted to keep the hoodies, because I started with hoodies and I want to kind of keep that as the core, and I want to make it where I can kind of, I mean, I like to write too and I have ideas for the next drops, but in certain drops I want to give opportunities for writers and different artists to maybe showcase their work that's not been put out there, right, and put that on pieces. And it's been really cool. The response has been like really wonderful, and I'm really excited about it, and I hope to keep growing it more and maybe do a couple other collabs with people and stuff. But for now, I'm focusing on this, and it's been a really nice creative outlet for me.
I believe. And where can people find it?
So right now everything's online, so it's called Sentiments with a C, so it's just sentiments.com, and they're on there. And I did very minimal drops because I want to keep it really exclusive, and once an item is made, it'll never be remade again. So what's on there now will never be resold, so we won't do reruns of anything. It's out and that's it, and you'll have to wait for a second drop.
All right, that is exciting. And
yeah, no, it's been really cool.
Have you the next one planned already?
Yeah. So somewhat, I have some ideas, which I want to do, and I have some friends who are really big into fashion who have been like incredibly helpful for me.
I believe
with designing and just everything. So I have ideas. So it'll come. I'll probably wait a few months before the second drop. But yeah, I have lots of ideas, and I'm really excited for it to see where it goes. And I just hope, I love when I want people to feel something from it. I want it to be meaningful. And I also wanted to incorporate like writings on there too, like even on the tags. It says, "Would you rather know more, understand more?" Which I think is really interesting, because like a lot of people, like it'll make someone like stop and think about it. And it's not really been done before where two things were like incorporated as such. So yeah.
That's super exciting. And wishing you nothing but the best for that. And
thank you.
Of course, for everything else that is coming from you, and super exciting. And it was really, really, really interesting and deep to talk about the things that we touched on today. But I don't want to let you go before it's your chance to ask a few questions. And it would be really kind of you if you would have one question for the listeners, for the creative family, and maybe one for the next guest.
Yes. I would like to ask the audience, what has been your greatest teacher? I always feel like in life there's something which will either put things in perspective for you or will teach you so much, whether it's a person, an incident, a situation. So that's my question. And then for the next guest, I want to know what inspires you when everything else fails too.
Thank you. I love that you ask for the greatest teacher. That's a really powerful one. I'm really curious what comes back.
Yeah, me too.
I know who's the next guest, but I won't reveal now.
I just feel, especially as creative, like obviously you're going to have a lot of creatives on here, and I feel like sometimes you can feel a little bit uninspired, but I always feel like there's just something that no matter how uninspired you can be feeling, that one thing will just spark it back up in you.
So the audience, they can reach you, of course, through Instagram, as you mentioned. And yes. Is there any other platform that you would love to share?
Nope, I am just on Instagram. I make some weird TikTok videos with my mom, but I don't really go on there. That's just more, and like my dog, that's more just for my own entertainment. It's just Instagram. It says, "Don't be Billy." Not a lot of people get the username, but it's like, "Don't be silly, don't be Billy."
All right. I thought it was really funny when I read it the first time. And so it was really, really exciting. And is there anything else that you would love to touch on that we didn't talk about?
I think that's good. I feel like we covered a lot of good topics.
All right. So it leaves me with nothing but to thank you for your time and for making this honest and deep conversation. That's really, really appreciated. And Wishing you nothing but the best for everything you do next and for your life. And thank you for being part of this.
Thank you. No, it was so wonderful to connect. I'm really glad. It's my first podcast ever, so I'm glad it was with you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Creative Industry Radio. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and took away some valuable insights into the creative industry. I'd love to hear from you and to continue the conversation. So make sure to leave a comment on the respective show episode posts on Instagram and LinkedIn, and let us know what you think about the image and the story to it that was shared. And of course, you're welcome to answer the question of today's guest. And if you liked what you heard today and found value in it, why not share the love and forward this episode to a friend or colleague who could also benefit from the content? Your support means the world to me, and a subscription to this podcast would be greatly appreciated. So, until next time, keep being creative and stay tuned for more episodes of Creative Industry Radio. This is your host, Jan, signing off.